Welcome to the Nebula Music Podcast, an interview series where I talk to some of today's most influential musicians, bands, artists, entrepreneurs, and basically anyone who's killing it in the music industry. Today, I'm excited to be speaking with Victoria Canal, an artist who doesn't need any introduction. I mean, if you've been on Instagram anytime over the past couple of months, I guarantee that you've seen her videos pop up on your Explore feed. She's absolutely phenomenal. She's got a great voice and a really talented singer-songwriter who's now making a name for herself in the publishing world, in the artist world, and she's just blowing up. So I'm excited that I got a chance to speak to her on my show and to share that conversation with you guys. At the end, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on my website because I bring lots of artists just like Victoria on the show on a weekly basis to talk about their career and to really share some good information that will help you push your career forward. So let's not waste any more time. Let's dive right in. All right, what's up, everybody? I am very excited because I have been working really hard to get the next guest on the show, and I mean it. I've been putting a lot of effort because I believe that she's worth it, and she's someone that I've wanted to get to know for a long time, and so I'm really excited to have Victoria Canal on the show. Victoria, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for taking the time out of your day to speak to me. I know you're all the way out there in New York, where it's a lot colder than Los Angeles, California. We're nice and warm here. You guys just went through like a random snowstorm the past couple of days.
Yeah, I'm super jealous, so don't boast too much.
Well, I mean,
I wish I were in LA.
That's why I try my best to push everyone to move out to LA because this is just where it's at. But you know what? New York is a great city. And, I honestly don't want to waste any time about, me talking about you because I feel like a lot of the people listening know who you are. You've been making a splash on social media for a while now. You're just an incredibly talented musician all around. You blew me away the very first time I ever watched you play and heard you sing, and I knew that I wanted a chance to get to know you. So, Victoria, I don't want to waste time. Why don't you go ahead and catch us up a little bit? Maybe let us know what you're currently up to. Maybe a little bit about your backstory, and we'll just go from there.
Sure, yeah. Well, there's lots that I'm up to. I've been taking some publishing meetings with publishing companies that are interested in me as a writer.
Nice. Which companies, can I ask?
I don't know if I should say.
Okay, never mind.
But yeah, only because if I go spewing all the information, then all the publishing companies will know which ones I'm, anyway. But some majors, some independents. Like I'm not really too concerned about signing anything right now because those contracts, they take away a lot if you're not careful. Yeah. But in any case, I'm prepping for a tour in June and July, opening for Michael Franti, which should be really fun.
Nice.
It's my first time hopping on a bus and doing, shows for like upwards of 10,000 people. I've never done anything like that before.
Wow.
So it's going to be a true test of growth and a really cool experience. I've never had the chance to travel around the United States before, but you were asking about my upbringing. So yeah. I was born to an American mom and a Spanish dad, and I've pretty much grown up all around the world. I was born in Munich, and because of my dad's work, we traveled a lot, and I lived in Shanghai and Tokyo and Dubai and Amsterdam, Madrid, Barcelona, just a bunch of major cities around the world. Because of my parents' work. So that has kind of influenced my voice, I think, as a writer and as a musician, because of experiencing all these different cultures and really having a passion for connecting with people of all walks of life, you know?
What's your favorite city so far, by the way? I'm just curious.
Well,
they're all different. I know every city has its charm, but I'm curious if you prefer one, at least for like what you do.
Totally. I loved Sydney.
Nice.
And New Zealand is incredible in terms of its nature and just total Zen feeling. London and Barcelona and Tokyo. I mean, I'm literally just like listing places that I've been and lived. I can't pick one. Honestly, that's why I love, being privileged enough to travel, which I know that not everybody is. So I'm super grateful for it, because, you don't have to choose only one place. You can kind of discover all of them for yourself. But I would definitely recommend London and Barcelona and Tokyo as my top places.
Wow, I love the cities that you mentioned. I'm actually part Spanish myself, believe it or not, and I can speak.
I can tell by your profile picture, by your Skype picture.
Oh, nice. Okay, you know what's
Yeah.
interesting, and I don't mean to sidetrack here, but like I think some of my fans understand that I am Hispanic, and I get a lot of people can never really guess like who I am, or at least like what country I'm from. And I'm curious if people can sort of guess like what your background is. But like for me, I'm Hispanic. I'm primarily Guatemalan.
Yeah.
So Central American. But I'm curious, like for you, you're half Cuban, you said, right? And half American, right?
Yeah.
So do people ever guess that you're like that mixture? Do they ever feel like you're just one or the other, or even something completely different?
Yeah. Yeah, so usually like Spanish speakers can pretty much tell off the bat that I speak Spanish. I don't know why, but they just assume that I'm Latina and they start speaking to me in Spanish,
I
which I
hear that
love.
accent. I like that.
Yeah.
Latina, yes.
Yeah. But I don't know. Sometimes I've gotten like Indian or Arabic, like, or just white. It really depends like where I am. Some people will just assume that I'm white, like 100%. And yeah, I have some like native Indian heritage, I
Nice.
think, but mostly half Spanish, like Cuban Spanish. And then, but my grandparents migrated from Cuba to Spain, and I mean, my dad was raised in Spain, so when it comes to like Spanish, if we had a conversation in Spanish, you would probably say I sound like a madrileña, like not like
Wow.
a Central American or
Do you
something.
have the not the, what do you call it? Not the list, but you know what I'm saying?
Yes, yes, Barcelona, that kind of
Oh,
thing.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh man, you sound cool. You're gonna sound cooler than me speaking in Spanish because I have that Central American dialect, which is still
I
cool.
love that. It's super charming.
Oh
I
yeah.
love that accent.
We're here geeking out about Hispanic stuff, and it's amazing. I always geek out when I meet another Hispanic on the show, or just in general, just because I don't meet many out here, at least in LA, in the music industry. And I'm very happy that you're making a splash with what you do, because as many people that are listening understand, you are very talented. You are a very talented musician, and I don't say that to anyone that I don't mean. So I absolutely mean it. And I'm curious, Victoria, like, so you grew up basically everywhere. The whole world is your home, essentially. How and why did you just start music? Like, I'm curious how you started that, because obviously moving around a lot, I didn't necessarily move around a lot, but I imagine, that having to transition a lot, you make something your home and then you have to move after a couple of years, could maybe be a little bit tiring or maybe enjoyable depending on who you are. So I'm curious, like, what led you to music? Was it more of an escape? Was it more of something that you sort of stumbled upon, or something like that? I'm just curious.
Well, I think the root of it all was my grandmother. She's a piano teacher, or she was a piano teacher, and she played for church. And I would just watch her and listen to her, and I fell in love with it, from the beginning. Music is one of my very first memories, sitting on her lap and kind of putting my little hand on top of her hand, and like trying to touch the keys through her fingers, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I would sing along, and I was singing harmonies by the time I was 4. Like I
What a
think
pro.
she noticed. She noticed something, and my parents, trusted her when she said, "Hey, maybe you guys should give her some voice lessons, like find someone to train her." And that's what they did. When I was 6 years old, I started classical training in piano and voice. And by the time I was 11, I discovered songwriting. I don't know what led me to write Actually, I remember, speaking of Hispanic, I remember listening to Maria Callas,
Ooh.
which is she's a Spanish opera singer. And uh, like her song came on in the radio, and my dad was singing along, and I was like, I love that melody, but I want to be able to play and sing it myself. So I rewrote this Maria Callas song in English and changed the melody and changed the chords, but it was based off of this sort of idea, and that was kind of the first song I ever wrote. And I can't remember. It was like a really crappy song because it was like a wannabe, song. But I basically took the structure, and I think since then I kind of like I taught myself what it was to have a verse and a chorus and a verse and a chorus and a bridge and a chorus, that kind of thing. And I loved poetry growing up. I was such a big reader, just reading books, and I would like freaking, just read the dictionary and
Really?
try to. Yeah, I was a weird kid, and I think moving around a lot made me have to say goodbye to a lot of people. So I have this sort of strange habit of like making a really good first impression, but then being afraid of any deeper connection beyond that. And beyond that point, beyond like meeting someone for the first time and blowing them away with how much I've traveled and what instruments I play and shit like that. Like
Yeah.
I don't know if I can swear on the show.
No, go for it. Absolutely.
Okay. I mostly like spent my time making music, because that was like my introverted kind of self, just making sense of everything and being okay with the fact that I'm leaving everywhere all the time, So even though I loved moving around a bunch because it taught me so much about the world and about how I see it, at the same time, I think I have a much harder time making relationships that I feel like are something more than temporary because I'm used to that goodbye,
Do you feel like that's, and this is me basically just sort of speculating, but because you are very well traveled and the music that you're currently making, I'm curious if you feel like, obviously it's something we can't change, but do you feel like that's something that's sort of necessary for some musicians, not necessarily everyone, but that whole concept of being able to move on relatively quickly so that you're constantly kind of moving on to new things? Do you feel like that's something that sort of has benefited you in any way, or do you feel like it's something that maybe not so much or maybe has no effect? But I'm curious how you feel about that. And we're an interesting breed. Creative people, we're very interesting. We just grow up in very different environments, but we somehow all get connected by this need to create. And so I'm always interested by our different, the way we behave differently with people and what makes us tick. And so for you, it's interesting that you bring up that because you had to move, you sort of grew up understanding that you couldn't be living in the past, for lack of better words, that you couldn't just be stuck back there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you mean, but I think part of the reason I'm an artist and I have to write music is because it's not so much something I've gotten used to or adjusted to as much as something that I cope with. And I would say I don't move on easily. I actually dwell.
Really?
And that's what makes me write music is the fact that I overthink everything and I dwell on a lot of things that I should be not thinking about anymore. And I think that's what makes me an artist is like having to somehow express these, like this constant feeling of longing, of wanting to stay somewhere longer or wanting to not miss someone anymore and that kind of thing. But just kind of having to deal with the fact that the end always comes, and that can be really heartbreaking, and the way that you slowly stitch your heart back together is by playing some pretty chords and singing your heart out and crying a little bit, you know what I mean? Like that's the basis of my, I mean, as dark as it sounds, like I'm either like when I'm coping with something, I'm either listening to Bon Iver or Ben Howard, like lying on the floor in the dark, staring at the ceiling, or I'm writing a song, like, leaning over my piano in near tears. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's where my songs come from. But then there's this opposite end of the of that like the spectrum of songwriting, where it's like, damn, my life is great, there's so much to celebrate, which is like the Stevie Wonder in
Yeah.
like in my like my musical brain. There's like the Ben Howard and the Bon Iver on one end of the spectrum, and then Stevie Wonder and Motown on the other end, you know. And I kind of, depending on the time of the day, almost, I'm kind of like at one end or the other, or like flailing somewhere in between.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my musical brain. I don't know if that's interesting to anybody but me.
I think it is. I think
Yeah.
it's fascinating because it's what I was mentioning earlier. You know, I feel like when it comes to being creative, we sort of take from, you know, our environment or whatever it is that we're sort of living through at the moment, and express that. I mean, that's the whole point of being a creative person, right? It's kind of taking what we know and converting it into something really good. And I'm curious, like with your music, I think you were already kind of touching up on it a little bit, but I'm just very curious with how you approach your songwriting because it's very good. Do you feel, or do you find yourself sort of just writing about what you're feeling at the moment, like you sort of said, or do you strive to sort of solve something or sort of have like a balance emotionally when you're writing a song? And I'm not even sure if that question sort of makes sense, but I'm trying to.
It does. It totally does.
Yeah, so I'm curious, like, how do you approach that?
Well, the way that if I'm understanding you right, it's like
I hope so.
either yeah. It's either like the way I think about it is like when I write a song, it's either one of the two ways that you're describing. So it's either that I'm in a place and I want to wallow in that place emotionally, and like if I'm sad, I'm like, I'm gonna write a song that's like all about being sad, and I'm gonna totally indulge in this feeling of sadness because I hate everything and I just want to do this right now, you know? And then the
Yeah.
other way is like kind of like this tension that you want to relieve, and feel better like once you've done that. Um, I don't think I write songs that way as much, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, that's the way that I listen to music, is kind of like massaging attention in my soul or in my spirit to kind of relieve it and feel okay again. That's how I listen to music. But when I create music, it's more like I'm gonna feel this as intensely as I possibly can and write through that so that when somebody else hears this, they'll be healed. And that this will be when I listen to music, that process will happen to someone else when they listen to my music.
Do you feel like your best music comes out from that emotion, like your need, or like when you're trying to like you said right now, when they listen to your music, they'll be healed. Do you feel like some of your best music has been written when you're in that mindset, or were you maybe at the opposite side of the spectrum, like Stevie Wonder, like you were mentioning earlier? I'm just curious if we can even categorize that, because as artists, sometimes we can't really like think about what is best or what we made that was better than the other. But I'm curious if maybe you have like, if you feel like if you've written your better work while you were on either side of the spectrum, like when you were trying to heal or when you were just being happy.
Yeah, totally. I would definitely say my sadder music is better.
It tends to be true, though. That tends to be true.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like, look, this sounds dark, but like there's nothing like making someone cry at a concert.
Yeah.
Like, I'll sing a happy little tune about being young and dumb and in love. And that'll be cute and people will sing along with the post chorus, but there's literally nothing like singing a song about my bipolar brother and raising the conversation of what it's like to love someone who doesn't understand how to accept that love, and then have someone come up to you and say, my mom, struggled with bipolar or struggles with bipolar. I struggle with bipolar. My sister does, or like it's music that starts a conversation, more than just a temporary relief during the song. And I think sometimes that the music that tugs a little more at you and makes you think after it's finished, without necessarily being like a call to action political like Bob Dylan song. I think there's something more powerful in that. But when you're talking about like what's cool, that's a whole different ball game. Like I I've always wanted to be an artist that just makes cool shit. Like if you listen to it, it's like, oh my God, that production, those chords, those runs. But like, I think where I fit is not really so much that. It's more like, oh my gosh, like she made me think about calling my dad and telling him I love him. Or like she made me feel okay about my body again after I haven't seen myself as beautiful for the past 10 years. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that, I feel like that's where I sit a little more. And unfortunately, as like lame as that makes me to a lot of my peers, it's just my responsibility as an artist, and even as being like a quote unquote handicapped or differently abled artist, being born with. For those of you who are listening who don't know me, I was born without half of my right arm due to a syndrome called amniotic band syndrome, and it's fairly common, but it usually wraps around the waist or the neck and causes stillbirth. And in my case, it wrapped around my limb.
Wow.
In any case, like that's part of my persona and my artistry is like I'm someone who can lift people up and make them want to get out of bed in the morning and say, you know what, fuck yeah, I can do this, I'm
Yeah.
great, and nothing's gonna get in my way, and I can like literally chase after whatever dreams I want to, and not be afraid of that. And I think, assuming that position as an artist, it might be somewhat pretentious of me to assume that that's what I'm supposed to do, but
No, I don't think
everybody
so.
needs to everybody needs to find their purpose, and I feel like if I can change people's lives in any way, that's something I feel good about doing, and that's what makes me get up out of bed is like, and continue writing songs. Sometimes I sit down and write a song and I'm like, this sucks so bad. Like I am literally the worst musician of all time. And
Wow.
like I think that way like often, but
I
like,
think we all
but
do.
but yeah, hopefully it's not just me, but like I hope that by just keeping by just doing it and putting myself through everything that I might not want to do just because I'm feeling bad about myself, by striving on and putting one foot in front of the other, I can serve other people, and I can make this life one that's worthwhile because I have a lasting influence on someone through my voice or through my image or through my music.
Which I think is absolutely necessary. I mean, thank you so much for being very open. That's actually something I always want to make sure that my guests feel comfortable with, because I think it's important, especially in our day and age. And there's so many things that you brought up that I'm very curious about. But like, and I'm sure I'll get a chance to circle back to some of them. But I'm curious. So and you can always feel free to stop me if I'm ever digging too deep. I have a bad habit of just talking for way too long, which is hence why I have this show. But I mean, Victoria, I personally, for anyone who hasn't seen your stuff, I highly urge you to look at Victoria Canal right now. Like, just pause what we're talking about and go check her out, because you are absolutely talented. And if people were to hear your music, even before they realize that you were born without like half your, I think, your right arm, right?
Yeah.
I feel like you'd be blown away to realize that you can play so well with just, with that condition. And so I'm curious, like, as a musician, as someone who picked up instruments as a way to cope and to express yourself creatively, it's interesting to me that you picked music because of that. You get what I'm saying? And it's, again, forgive me if I'm being a little too blunt, but a lot of people get very discouraged when you have something that doesn't let you be normal, quote unquote. Not saying we're all normal, but you get what I'm saying. And so I'm curious, like, how difficult was it at first to start with music? And did you know right away, like when you started playing, after like, you realized that you were good at songwriting, but when you actually started playing instruments and started playing the piano and all that, was it difficult to jump into that like musicianship world? And how did you approach that? Because obviously I think you had to approach it differently from most people, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't play instruments because, like it wasn't, a coping mechanism for being an amputee or
Right.
anything like that. Like I loved the music first, and then there just
Yeah,
so
that's what I
happened
was referring to. Sorry if I,
yeah.
yeah.
No, that's cool. It's cool. Because sometimes people think, and it's fine for them to think that if it works for them, but like they think that I did it almost out of spite, to like to prove to people that I could do something like play an instrument. When
Yeah.
really it was just like I was inspired by my grandma. I loved music, full stop, and then I just happened to have six fingers available to play it, like six options for notes instead of 10.
Oh yeah.
And I guess when it comes to musicianship, like you're saying, a lot of like keys players kind of comment that when they hear me play, they think my cluster tones and like just the voicings that I use are really interesting. But I don't really think about them that way. It's more like I'm just trying to see how to make the chord sound full or dynamic, and yeah, I don't really think about how to make a chord sound like it has a cool cluster thing. I'm just trying to hit all the notes I can, with my available fingers.
Yeah.
And when it comes to songwriting, like I started playing classical piano way before I started writing, like 5-6 years before. And then I touched writing when I was 11 or 12. So like by that time, I had a basic grasp on. I've always played by ear, so I always had a basic grasp on being able to play along with a song. Like the first classical song that I ever played along to was "Man in the Mirror" by Michael Jackson. Not
Yeah.
that pop song. Yeah, so that was like the first like popular song. And I was like trying to figure out the key and like just all the like I'm sitting at a piano right now. It's,
Oh,
I
please play.
don't, yeah. Let me see if I can pull it up.
Oh my God. Yes. What a treat. Yes. I want to hear you play. Yes. Oh, dude.
Hold on. Like, I wanna make a change for once in my life. I wanna feel real good, gotta make it living. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So I was just like figuring all that shit out.
Woo.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
When I was like, 10 or something, and just went from there. I would always like harmonize to Jason Mraz songs on the way to school. I loved his lyrics, loved Michael Jackson's melodies and Stevie's chords and jazz and 2/5s and all that stuff. So I don't know. I've just been a geek, for as long as I can remember.
That is so cool. No, you sounded great. Like oh man, I was hoping that you would play at some point. I was going to be like, can you like play? I didn't realize you had a piano right there ready to go.
Well, like right before you called me, I was just working on a song. So,
That's so
yeah,
cool.
this is how I spend my evenings, is just on Logic, like writing songs and getting more ideas. I'm a little uninspired lyrically lately because I'm very in love, and that seems to be really bad for songwriting somehow. I need like more heartbreak in my life to write good lyrics, it seems.
Oh man, it's kind of funny that it's funny when a lot of artists, they say that pain does create a lot of really good music.
Yeah.
Because, you're just basically expressing your music. And it's interesting you bring that up because I did want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, at least, if I can remember it correctly. You were basically talking about how, a lot of your music, you basically, you give an example of like when you talk about, like your bipolar brother and someone comes and talks to you about that. And then you made a comparison to like, making music that was cooler or maybe like more popish or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious on your opinion on and how like pop music is to this day. Like I love pop music and I play it and I love it, but I'm curious if you feel like the kind of music that you play is more necessary now, just because of a lot of issues and a lot of progressive movements that luckily our generation is sort of spearheading. Do you feel like the kind of music that you write and gravitate towards is something that is necessary and that can sort of push the music industry forward, rather than just like you mentioned, like just the regular basic cool, like here's my beat kind of song? I'm not sure if that makes any sense, but I'm curious what you think.
Totally. Look, I don't feel like I have the right to say that my own music is going to be revolutionary in any sort of way. Um, when I write a song, I try not to be like, where is this going to fit in the context of the industry? And I try to be more like, what do I need to express in my heart right now? And how can I write something that resonates with people? Beyond that, I think that's what makes us all unique as artists. Like, let's take a pop artist that's really different to me, but that who I still really massively respect. Megan Trainor, for example.
Yeah.
She's like, she writes 3 chord songs. They're really repetitive, and she's got lyrics that are super catchy and a lot of times really empowering. I could never write a song like she writes those songs because I don't have a genius pop mind. Like we write different music, but I don't think that just because hers is about, feeling like you have a voice in a relationship, like, or feeling like just because you might be a different size that you're like, that you're just as valid, whatever size you are or whatever like that. I think there are hidden messages in music, even if it sounds repetitive or too catchy or kitschy, like if it's
Yeah.
really kitschy, like it can still really serve someone. And I don't think there's any reason to invalidate, a song just because it's popular, because in essence, like what it's doing is resonating with a lot of people and doing something for them to make their quality of life a higher one. So I could never shit on someone like, Cardi B, for example, just
Yeah.
because she's doing like a really like vulgar attitude song because what she's doing is empowering a lot of people to feel like they have a really badass voice, and that's
Yeah.
why she's popular. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I just feel like as an artist, even though I might be opinionated, and think that some catch, that tonight is like the most overused word, like in the whole music world, but and everybody uses it, but like just stuff like that doesn't get in the way of artists, serving what they're meant to serve, and as long as it's authentic, that I
Yeah.
don't really disrespect it. The only thing I would say is like when there are 12 writers on a song, but only 8 words in the song, for example,
Oh yeah.
that kind of thing. And then the music video is like a bunch of white women in bikinis who all look like Victoria's Secret models, and there's no representation. That's what upsets me because that's kind of dumbing down the general standard of the public, and
Yeah.
that more comes from the label side being like, let's sell as much as we can, rather than there being any sort of mission to widen representation in the media. So
Yeah.
when it comes to popular music, I just feel like it's a shame when there's no branching out whatsoever, or exploration of like different lifestyles.
Yeah.
But I'm really excited generally about the top 10 or, Hot 100 Billboard, not because I listen to any of the music. I don't like it, but I do love the fact that hip hop is like the most popular thing out there right now, because it's about time that, Black people and people of color be represented the way
Yeah.
that they want to be. Like it's just really refreshing to see diversity, even if I'm not super into hip hop. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's really cool to see a Latina woman being on the number one, and um, you know just stuff like that. I There's not as much to hate about pop music as people might think, except for, subjectively whether you like the actual music. But I think there's a lot more that's being represented there, which is really
Yeah.
exciting to me.
No, I love that, and I love that you bring that up because it's. I have also noticed an interesting shift in the way the pop music scene is going. So, like a lot of my playing, it does involve around a lot of pop artists, and that's sort of where I've made my career. And it's interesting to me to like think about pop music like back in 2008 and then pop music now and how much it's changed. You know, like 2008 was like college time for me. And to hear how much hip hop, just as an example, has evolved, it's interesting to me how much the actual music has changed. And so I wanted to ask you specifically because, you know, you're half Cuban, right? And so I'm curious if you feel like, at least right now, do you feel like there's more of like that Latin influence sort of coming into the pop mainstream? I mean, I believe just last year that collaboration between Justin Bieber and what was the other guy? You know which one I'm talking about? The song that was like the biggest song. Yeah. Obviously, that was a primarily Latin song first, and Justin Bieber came on later. I'm curious if you see like a trend that sort of right now happening with a lot more like Hispanic influenced music sort of influencing the pop scene.
When it comes to Latin music, I listen to a lot of older stuff, like
What
not
do you mean
so
by old?
much old like what my grandparents listened to. Like you know, Guantanamera,
Oh,
like
hell yeah.
these like you know, like old classic singers. What's like that band that everybody talks about, the Cuban Wave? I can't remember, but I don't really listen to new Latin music, but I also don't listen to new pop. Like I have a very weird taste in music. So when it comes to, I feel like the only problem I have with the Latin representation right now is that it seems a little bit stereotype driven, and that it doesn't really embody the entirety of what Latin artists are doing.
Yeah.
So like I feel like I'm not a Latin artist because I'm not making that kind of music, but I also feel like I should be able to call myself like a Latin
Well, you are.
artist. I am, because of my blood. Like I that's my heritage.
I mean, that makes
But
you Latin.
Right, exactly. But if I say Latin artist to someone, they immediately assume that I sound like that Despacito song. So like, you know, it's or like Havana, you know, by Camila Cabello. Like it's a cute song, but at the same time, it really kind of stereotypes what Latino should sound like. And I think it'd be more interesting to not like box in, you know, that kind of, you know, that kind of thing. Just like if, you know, as far as stereotypes go, if a black dude comes up to you and says, I'm an artist, you're going to assume that he's either an R&B singer or a rapper. And to be able to break that stereotype, like Daniel Caesar, for example, and be a singer-songwriter, rather than R&B or hip hop, like I think that stereotype is starting to break, but it's still taking a little bit for sure. But yeah, I mean, literally just looking at the United States top 50 right now, like it's really cool just to see literally all 10 be hip hop. I feel like that's a huge phase right now. Like pop is basically hip hop right now, which is blowing my mind. But it's really exciting that there's finally this representation and that everybody's really excited about it. I'm really excited to be a part, even if I don't make hip hop music, you know, like just to live in this time and witness this kind of like bounce back from, you know, hundreds of years of the Black community being super oppressed, and being like it's our turn kind of thing. Like, or not even our turn, but more like we're claiming our space and there's space for everybody. That kind of mindset. I just think for so long in the States, especially, there's been kind of this inequality, and finally, even though there's definitely a lot of progress to be made, I think a lot of people are starting to really welcome the idea of everybody having a place together here in this really eclectic, you know, vibrant country. And it's really easy to be scared of that if you're immediately threatened by it. But I'm not. I'm super excited by the fact that more people of color feel like they have a voice, and a growing voice, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just sitting here just listening to what you had to say, because it's so true. Like, I think it has, oh, at least the music industry has started to become more open-minded to what other cultures have to bring in. And it creates a nice melting pot of music. I mean, I think one of the great things that I love about, you know, the United States that we live in, is, you know, it's the birthplace of jazz, and jazz in its right is a mixture of like 5 different styles of music that all happen in different areas too. Like a lot of people think it just happened in like New Orleans, but like jazz was essentially created in like 4 or 5 different cities in a specific time. And that's one of the things I love about, you know, our industry and just our culture as a country that a lot of people tend to forget, is that we essentially are a melting pot. The music that we listen to, I mean, even like you mentioned that Despacito song, or even like some of the pop songs that we're listening to nowadays, they all have like one specific beat, which I'm not a very good beatboxer, but it goes something like a, you know that beat? Very prominent in Latin American music, but it's a calypso beat. Like it's a Middle Eastern beat. Like it originates from the Middle East. Yeah. Like it's an ancient groove that's existed for a long time that found its way over the ocean to like Latin America, and it's all around. And so when I sit here and I talk to someone like you about like how the music that we all love is all a gigantic melting pot, and how now finally, you know, people high up the food chain and just all of us collectively are finally starting to be able to be open-minded about, okay, maybe there is a space for all sorts of different things rather than just the same old, same old. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I thank you for bringing that up, because that always makes me happy to hear very conscious artists about that kind of stuff. I'm curious, like, do you ever find yourself using like some of the old school, like Latin influences in your music? Like, I know we talked about like how you were inspired and you rearranged that song when you were younger, but like, I'm curious, I'm like that old school, maybe even like Cuban, like rumba style and all that bunch of stuff. Like, do you ever find yourself using any of that stuff in like your new music?
I don't, but you know what? You're inspiring me. I feel like tonight I might work on something like that, because I've never really, like, I've been a fan, but I've never really sat down and consciously been like, let me start out with this kind of, you know, beat that's one of the tropes of Cuban or Latin music and go from there. But that would be really cute. I'm gonna do that. Thanks, Eddie.
Yeah, there you go. You're welcome. Now, I'm credited as a songwriter on that song, just so you know. Oh, my God. Victoria, you're a very lovely person. I'm so glad that I'm getting a chance to talk to you. So I'm curious. So, like, you have new music out, right? Or you're about to release a new EP, right? That's what you were saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about, like, the music that you have on this new EP. Like, what, obviously we've gotten a chance to get to know sort of what inspires your music. So I'm curious, like, if there's maybe like a specific track on that EP that's very special to you for whatever reason, and maybe how like you came about it, how you approached that song.
Yeah. There's this one song called Ebony on the upcoming project. It's actually the first single off it, and it's coming out April 12th.
Nice.
And the visual of it was actually, so I was playing this grand piano, and I was in a place in my life where just through playing those chords, the chords that I was writing, I kind of wanted to like sleep in that resonance and sleep inside the piano, and kind of like while those chords are playing, it sounds really weird, but like kind of feel that warmth and not have to deal with the pressures of the outside world and all these making decisions and growing up and, you know, facing your consequences. I kind of just wanted to escape all of that in this little safe haven of music. Yeah. And I feel like that's what music is in general, or can be. So I wrote a song called Ebony, all about carving my wounds inside the keys of a piano, kind of, while hiding on the inside, and in effect, those wounds cut through to the outside, so you actually breathe the air from the outside world while you're hiding in this little box, which is the piano. Wow. And that's the image of the song. It's kind of more like an art piece to me, like a visual art piece, but just in sonic form. And yeah, that's what that's about. So I hope you can check it out when it comes out.
I know we definitely will. I'm curious. So you're about to go on tour, right? So you're about to play for a lot of people. How are
Mhm.
you? Do you feel like you're going to be very well prepared? Well, obviously, I imagine you're going to be very well prepared for like your shows. But I'm curious, like mentally, how do you feel like you're going to handle it? Like when you see like your first 10,000 people, which is always an exciting sight for the very first time. Like I'm curious if you're nervous or if you're like excited or like how you
Yeah,
feeling.
I'm like I don't know what to feel, man. I mean, I know that they're not going to be there for me, so that's one thing. It's like it's humbling to know that they're going to be there for Michael Franti and that I'm someone that he's invited along, and I'm just lucky enough to be there in front of those people. The way I see it, it's, 20 minutes, 25 minutes of me trying to win them over and hopefully get them to come along to the next show when I'm back in the area. It's really just a chance for me to get better at what I do in front of a lot of different people and see how they respond to the music. I'm excited. I'd say it hasn't really sunk in yet because I'm not on the road yet. But once I am on the road, I'm sure the nerves will come out a little bit. I've done a lot of shows, and I just feel like the only thing that will be really nerve wracking for me is not being able to see the faces in the crowd, like having
Really?
it be so many. Yeah, because man, I'm all about like seeing the facial expressions and
Ah,
knowing what like how people are feeling and like I can almost cry to a sad song while I'm singing it if I see someone in the crowd cry like that, and then everybody starts crying because they see me crying, and then it's like a
yeah.
big emotional fest, and everybody's giving each other hugs and telling people and calling their mom and saying they love them. Like I don't know. I think it might be really different, and I just don't want to make it any less emotionally heavy or like heartless. I don't want it to be just me getting on stage and talking like I'm talking to a camera.
Yeah. Are you going to
So
approach it? Do you feel like you're going to shift your approach a little bit because of that? Or are you still going to approach it the same way you always do with like that passion?
yeah, I think I'm gonna approach it the exact same way. That'll be the challenge, is approaching it just like I'm having a conversation and singing you a couple of songs, and telling you about them. I really want it to be the same kind of experience.
And I think it will be because I think you have the vibe and you have the energy, the passion. I mean, just getting a chance to know you for this past like hour is, I was amazed before and I'm more amazed now because I love that I can sense the fire basically inside your music. And I love that you basically pour your soul, whether it's painful or not. Like, I think you are an embodiment of what a good songwriter is, I think, in my opinion. And I think you're very self-aware. You love what you do. And I think that's what a lot of us and a lot of the people listening to the show strive for, is that they all want to ensure that they're doing their best at what they love to do. And I think you're basically doing that, and you're just barely getting started.
Yeah, I feel like I have a lot to learn.
Oh,
But
but we all do, man. So, Victoria, thank you so much. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you covered that I was blown away by. I'm glad that I got a chance to get to know you better. And I'm just curious. Like, obviously, you're gonna have a lot of people listening to your story and trying to understand how it is that you do what you do. And a lot of these people always ask themselves, like, all right, so how do I get to where Victoria's at? Or like, what do I do today or tomorrow? What's next? What can I do next that can sort of help me either be more inspired, either start doing stuff, start doing something better? What would you tell someone, that wants to be doing what you're doing and wants to learn or at least try and grow from their experiences?
well, there are a few things. Mental health and balance are really important to me, and I find that I can't be productive unless I'm making an effort to do exercise on a daily basis and doing yoga, meditating, and eating right, and really not indulging in that much unhealthy food. Um,
Important. Super
yeah,
important.
absolutely. Just as an artist, like you need to be focused to be creative. I think that's honestly crucial. Another thing would be um, just take time to love yourself for who you are, just the way you are. Um, and remember that even if you never create again, you're enough, and you shouldn't tie yourself to the artist that you are, because that's you and the artist that you are two separate things. And if you get too closely tied to one and you forget that they're separate entities, you can really hurt yourself someday, even by being too successful and and thinking that you as a person are somehow less than you as an artist, because both are equally valid and important. If anything, you as a person are much more important than who everybody sees you as. And the final thing I would say is, like, even when you don't feel like doing something like performing or writing songs because of crippling self-doubt, just keep doing it, because it'll really help you in the long run to know how to get through those difficult moments and how to present your best self in front of hundreds of people, even when you're crippled on the inside, because it's just going to help you grow your character and expand your strength. It'll make you feel so much more like you have control over your weakest links as an artist, and that's helped me so much throughout my experience. But I'm super young, all of this advice is kind of just the advice I'm trying to give myself on a daily basis. So I hope that everybody knows that I'm no expert at anything, and this is all just from my perspective. I'm only 19 and I have a lot to grow and a lot to learn. So maybe we should have this conversation 5 years from now and see where my mind is at then. But
oh man. Yeah. Oh, you know what? For being 19, you give a lot of really good advice. I wish my 19-year-old version could have heard this conversation. It would have been a lot better off. I'll tell you that much. But thank you so much. You are a very inspiring individual. I'm very excited for what you're doing. Like you even said yourself, like you're giving yourself advice, but I think that's what successful people do. I mean, you have to be willing to be honest with yourself, be willing to grow, and be willing to just, do your thing. And I think you're doing that really well. And at only 19 years old, you're doing so much stuff. Like, it's just insane. And I couldn't be any happier for you. So congrats on all your success. And honestly, if anyone wants to get a hold of you, because I know we're all going to be rooting for you and making sure that you get as big as you possibly can. But if someone wants to get a hold of you, what would be the best way to get a hold of you?
You can definitely reach out to me via Instagram at Victoria Canal. Also Facebook. I usually see my messages on there, and Twitter. I'm really I'm easily accessible. I don't ignore messages. Like if you want to send me a message and say hey, I'll see it and I'll take the time to respond. So, and
bring a dictionary. You need one. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Victoria. I know that I definitely did. And as I say at the end of every episode, I'm always learning from everyone that comes through my show. Victoria is no exception to that. I definitely feel inspired. And I learned a lot about her backstory and how she's always really pushing herself to get the best out of the work that she's passionate about. And that's something that I really can't stress enough for you guys listening to this interview. Try and do that with everything that you guys do. If there's one thing that you guys want to do today, is to really focus and hone in on what it is that you guys are doing and explore that passion that drives you guys and really push yourself to be the best you can be with what you're working on right now. And as I said at the beginning, if you enjoyed this episode, I ask you to please consider subscribing, because I bring lots of guests on the show just like Victoria and many other great guests that I have lined up for the rest of the year. So you don't want to miss these, because I have lots of great content coming your way.